Hey Bookaholics, so welcome back to another video. Today I am bringing you some atmospheric seasonal recommendations. I have already done a recommendations video where I talked about some of the darker side of adult fantasy for those of you who wanted some dark fantasy for October and for this season. However, I've also pulled out some fantasies that match the vibes of what different readers would look for in their fantasy for Halloween and for the fall season. I'm going to go get into the different books that I have and why I think they might work for this season. I have 5 recommendations for you today. Now, I know that one of the common things that people like reading throughout this season is a murder mystery or a thriller. Even though I'm not that kind of reader, I think that a lot of fantasy fans really like it when the two intersect. So I pulled one up that also happens to have a really good Victorian atmospheric vibe. It has that dank, dark, grim feeling that you get from a lot of the Dickensian style Victorian stories. So the two combined with an adult epic fantasy story I think might work really well for some, and as it's indie it is a little bit more under hype, so I was hoping that I could bring this book to further attention, and that would be We Men of Ash and Shadow by H.L. Tinsley. This one, as I said, is a murder mystery style fantasy, and its setting is very gaslamp, it's very Dickensian Victorian, and in it we are following John Vanguard, who was in the military and is now basically working as a sort of police officer in this place, and when a string of murders start happening that threaten aristocracy, he gets involved and has to investigate. We also have a secondary perspective, which is a young girl named Taryn, and it's how the two intersect. It's very, with Taryn in it also has a vaguely picaresque vibe to it as well. So really good series, can't wait to continue, and suits the vibes immaculately for this season. For those of you who think of Halloween as being kind of the convergence of spirits, or has a link to religion, to the divine, if you're thinking of it more as All Hallows Eve, if you want your angels and your demons and your heaven and your hell, then a fantasy series that, though wasn't necessarily a new favourite for me, could definitely work for you, especially if you're a historical fiction fan, is the Banners of Blood series, or the first book here being The Son of the Morning by Mark Alder. This one is, Mark Alder is normally a historical fiction author. This is his first foray into fantasy, and I don't think it was all that well received because it does feel very historical fiction. So I think when you pick this up and you hear the synopsis about angels and demons, you are expecting this to be more fantastical than it is. But it does have a very clear element of fantasy, and that is the angels and demons. It is during the 100 Years' War, and the King of England is supposed to be able to call down upon his angels like the King of France is doing, but the angels are not listening. So then he possibly has to get entwined with the forces of hell. It does have discussions around heaven, hell, and the place of religion on earth. If that is something that suits your seasonal vibes, if you are wanting something that is very religious heavy and has very clear critiques of religion and of heaven and hell and their places in our society, it's a good shout. It was a good series, not a new favourite, but it might be for you. One that is very much a favourite of mine is the one I'm going to recommend for those of you who want horror. Those of you who want to read something that is incredibly unsettling, that will make you uncomfortable, that will make you think about it for days after you have finished it. And for me, that has to be Into the Drowning Deep by Myra Grant. I did not want to go anywhere near any body of water for a while after this one. And this is Killer Mermaids. Like, how could you possibly go wrong? With this one, we are following this group of people who have set out to go discover what happened to a ship. So 7 years ago, there was a ship called the Atargatis. They were a news crew that went to go see if there were mermaids in the Bermuda Triangle. It was a typical kind of like Mythbuster style TV crew. However, the ship had some terrifying audio and then went radio silent and disappeared. So we have a new crew, including the sister of the presenter from the previous ship, now going to investigate what happened to that ship 7 years ago. And while we're there, we might also discover some killer mermaids. It's horrifying, this story. It's so unnerving. The atmosphere you could cut with a knife. The tension is so well done, and all of the characters and their investment in this is just such an incredibly well written story, and I would highly recommend checking it out. For those of you who always think of fall as dark academia season, then I have a treat for you, because I have one that is not only dark academia, but also vampires. And I don't hear a lot of people talking about it on their dark academia lists, and everything about this feels entirely dark academia. And also, it centers slightly on Dracula, and therefore on vampirism. And that is The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova. Now, again, not necessarily a new favorite of mine. There were just a couple of things that, because I'm a history nerd, I found a little bit hard to wrap my head around a little bit, because some of the falsehoods that came, because they kept talking about Dracula as Vlad the Impaler or Vlad the Third or whatever name, the historical figure you want to give him. They kept talking about him as the historical figure, not as Dracula. And the problem that came with that is that it came with historical inaccuracies to suit the narrative for Dracula. So I found that difficult, and I found it quite annoying. But if you're not a history nerd and you just want to read yourself some good old Dracula stories that also have a dark academia vibe, you can't go wrong with this one. The vibes were immaculate. The writing style was so good. It's so digestible, so readable. The atmosphere throughout this entire novel is so well crafted, because it perfectly balances that atmospheric, dark vampire novel, like a Dracula style novel, with the dark academia, pretentiousness, investigative, murder mystery atmosphere that you get from current day, modern day dark academia. So fantastic combo for any of you who are looking for that. As I said, not necessarily a new favorite of mine, but it very, very well could be a new favorite for some dark academia fans out there. And the last one that I have is a witchy book. But not your typical witchy book. I see so many witchy lists every year, and they're all very similar. A lot of them are like, you know, somewhere in Scotland or somewhere in America, Salem, all of those kind of things. And I wanted one that very, very much emulates the witchy vibes and the witchy atmosphere, the persecution that you get from being a witch, etc., but without being a traditional witchy novel. And for that one, I got Conjure Women by Afia Atakora. This is one that I read back in February, and I loved this book. It's an absolute gem of a novel. Not enough people are talking about it either. And it has complete witchy vibes. We have the protagonist, who very clearly has inherited some witchy abilities from her mother. Now, they can curse people, and it's kind of more like the kind of magic that is much more ethereal. It's not potions and stuff necessarily, but it's a very ethereal magic, and I really loved how tangible that felt, because it was just belief. Like, you have to suspend your disbelief, but only slightly. And I really loved that. And it's set on a slave plantation. We are following slaves, and it is told in two timelines, which is during their servitude and then after the liberation that the North gave the South. And I really loved the discussions in this book as well. So again, witchy books being there for discussion is 100% what they should be there for. So this book it gave a new angle to witchy stories. It gave a new setting to witchy stories, and still very much feels like the exact embodiment of what you would want from a witchy book, just with a different focus and a different lens. And I loved that so much. So yeah, if you're wanting a witchy book, but you're wanting something different, you're not wanting just another set in France or set in Salem, and you want something that has a different feel to it, but still very much you can tell is a witchy novel, Conjure Women by Afia Atakora. Go get it. It's a fantastic novel. So those are my 5 recommendations for you today. I hope that you've at least found something that might be of interest to you for this season or for next season. This video is coming a bit late. I just thought I would give some recommendations for books that I haven't heard people talking about, and that have different elements that different readers look for during the Halloween season. With that being said, that is all from me for today. So thank you ever so much for watching, and I'll hopefully catch you in another one soon. Bye!